You know, nobody thought that was possible in the midst of an economic disaster. And that's because nobody realized that our members, with the support of their union, with our commitment to progress, our members will do whatever it takes to save our members' job. And now that's a union that works, and that's a union that we should all be very proud of, and that's a union that stands up and fights back while others don't. Our tire and rubber locals in the industry, remain strong and viable today, largely because of our members' strength and largely because of our members' solidarity. Despite ongoing threats for our members overseas from rotten trade deals, our members at the 3 largest U.S. companies ratified new contracts early last year. Contracts that strengthened protections for our jobs, got substantial wage increases, got benefit improvements, and got commitments from employers to keep investing in our North American facilities. And earlier this year, I get the years confused here, the International Trade Commission ruled that duties on illegally subsidized Chinese off-road tires would be continued based on a case that the Steelworkers Union filed along with Titan Tire. Sisters and brothers, we're going to fight for this industry. We're going to fight for every industry, because those industries and those plants, they belong to us. We do the work. We make the products. We make them their profits. And without us, they got nothing. So we're not going to let some complacent employer or the corrupt trading system give it away. But you know what? In order to prove injury in these trade cases, we shouldn't have to lose our jobs in order to win a case. The trading system is asked backwards, and one of our challenges after this convention is going to be to take on the fight to change the rules of trade so that if you prove that a country is cheating, that should be enough. You shouldn't have to lose your damn job to prove it. Some of you will remember that in 2009, we filed a Section 421 petition, which is a complicated process under U.S. trade laws. In September of 2009, President Obama gave sanction to the 421 by issuing sanctions of 39%, 34%, and 29% on imported Chinese tires. But you know what? The tariff allowed our facilities to stem the tide, allowed them to invest, stop the hemorrhaging of jobs, to rebound and retool in the tough times in the middle of that recession. Our international did whatever it took to win those trade cases, and our members did whatever it took to turn that victory into bargaining gains. But here we go again. As soon as the Section 421 tariffs ended, the Chinese were back at it. Think about this for a rotten trading system. They were even stockpiling tires in so-called free trade zones. And they were sitting millions of tires offshored container ships ready to dump that on our market as soon as the tariffs were lifted. Damn right it's a shame. Think of this. After that expiry of the tariffs, this is a mind-boggling number. Imports more than doubled from China to 50.8 million tires last year. And it increased by an additional 24.5% in the first quarter of this year. So if you think of that, that's over 60 million tires being dumped on the US market, undermining our members' jobs, undermining the future of our communities, undermining the potential well-being of our kids and grandkids. And the only remedy we have is to inject ourselves into the unfair trade process that can take anywhere from 8 or 9 months to 2 years. Sisters and brothers, that fight has to be a fight that we're willing to take on, not just for ourselves, but for the future of our two countries. Because whatever happens in the US will happen in Canada. Whatever happens in Canada will eventually happen in the US. And a trading system that allows that to happen to the workers is a trading system that needs to be changed. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do it together. Well, guess what? Guess what? We filed another trade case this year against China for dumping tires, as I said. The leaders of our union at all levels, including our local unions, testified at those hearings on July 22nd. And we expect rulings from the Commerce Department shortly on the duty determination. And we're just going to keep fighting. But while we're fighting that case, we're going to have to move to the Congress. And it's hard to believe we can get anything done with these right-wing extremists. But we got to put it on the table. We got to put the issue of how this trading system doesn't work. I'm not even talking about trade deals yet. I'm just talking about the process of invoking relief for rotten trade deals. We're going to have to put that on the table, and we're going to have to ask your help to fight for that in every corner of the two countries. 20 years after NAFTA, 13 years after China joined the WTO, and 2 years after the trade deal with Korea, the results are in and the verdict is clear. America's trading policies suck, as I said, and they need to be changed. So as we meet here today, thousands of steelworkers are laid off because of Korea's criminal conduct in tubular products. We beat back China's dumping on tubular goods, and now we've turned our guns on Korea. We're doing and will do whatever it takes to stop this job stealing by China, Korea, or any other country that is cheating to try and steal our jobs. And we've held protest rallies in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Alabama, and up on the Iron Range. And as I said, we won't stop fighting in this case until Korea is forced to pay for its job-stealing conduct. And if the ITC won't do it, as I said, we're going to move to Congress, and we're going to force Congress to do it one way or another. Because I've said time and time again, because success in trade deals shouldn't be measured by the number of lousy trade deals that get signed. It should be measured by the number of good jobs that can support families that get created. And that's what we've got to demand that this country, that's what we've got to demand that Canada does. As far as the latest bullshit that they're calling the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I've got two words. Who thinks that that piece of crap will ever see the light of day? And as I said, I've got two words, and I'll surprise you. I'll just say those two words aren't happy birthday. It's a global struggle we're in, sisters and brothers. And I want to say nowhere has that been more apparent in the last few years than at the heroic stand that our members took at Local 9490 in Alma, Quebec. They fearlessly took on a 6-month lockout by one of the most rotten corporate bastards on the planet, Rio Tinto, who is the world's 3rd largest mining company. The members at 9490 flatly rejected Rio Tinto's demand that listen to this now, Rio Tinto's demand that upon their retirement, they would be replaced by non-union workers earning half the pay and fewer benefits. Think of the audacity of these bastards to even propose that. Who do they think would ever vote for that piece of shit to get it ratified? Nobody. Our members not only took on that battle for themselves and their families, they took on that fight for their community and for future generations. They had a heroic sacrifice that resounded throughout Canada and across the globe. Their strategic campaign ended Rio Tinto's brutal 6-month lockout, but not without a worldwide fight. Working closely with the Canadian National Office and our International Affairs Department, as well as District 5 leadership and the Quebec Federation of Labour, our members built global support for their fight against union busting. And along the way, they exposed a secret deal between Rio Tinto and Quebec Hydro, a publicly owned company owned by the province that Rio Tinto would sell its surplus energy during the lockout to Hydro-Quebec, and Rio Tinto would gain as much as $15 million a month, even though the utility didn't need the electricity. That was a sleazeball scheme that tried to bust our union, and our members exposed it everywhere they went for the scheme that it was. They traveled the globe building support for their fight, They built a dynamic international campaign. They mounted a major rally in Alma. For those of you that know Canada, this is north. They mounted a major rally in Canada that involved 8,000 people in the dead of winter, including delegates from Canada, the US, as far away as Europe, Africa, and Australia. That really bolstered our member spirits by showing that their support for their tenacious stand went far beyond the province of Quebec. To strengthen the global reach of their effort, our strategic campaigns, now think of this, how strategic and innovative this was. Our strategic campaigns department launched a program called Off the Podium at the 2012 Olympics. Rio Tinto was the official supplier of all the Olympic medals. This ingenious campaign exposed the hypocrisy of Rio Tinto by revealing Rio Tinto's long record of labor and human rights abuses and environmental destruction. Pressure was put on the London Olympic Organizing Committee from Unite the Union, our partner in Great Britain. And our union partner in Great Britain took them on right in their own backyard. In the end, sisters and brothers, our members' unrelenting pressure, fortified by our strategic campaign efforts all around the globe, and our global alliances defeated Rio Tinto's union-busting demands. It was one of the most successful global campaigns ever undertaken by any trade union anywhere at any time. And sisters and brothers, it illustrates, profoundly illustrates, the importance of the work that we do with other unions around the world. That's why we need to do the kind of work we do. We need each other against the forces of global capital. And I want to say now, in this room, we have the local union president, Hugo Villeneuve, and we owe our members at Local 9490 nothing less than a rousing tribute right here, right now, for the fortitude and the guts that they showed by traveling the world to show the third largest mining company in the world that we're not going to take this shit anymore. Sisters and brothers, I'm trying to show that whether it's local unions big or whether it's local unions small, we're always willing to do whatever it takes. And our Rio Tinto victory proved that when a union that works together, doing whatever it takes, whether it's at the local level, it can resound around the world. And as I said, there can hardly be a better example of activism. But also there's another good example of activism. Sunoco and ConocoPhillips in Pennsylvania. Right after our last convention, Sunoco and ConocoPhillips announced plans to shut down 3 refineries in eastern Pennsylvania if buyers couldn't be found. A decision, if allowed to stand, would have devastated communities throughout that part of the state and created havoc in markets up and down the East Coast. Our members and our union didn't hesitate to act. Within days, with help from the International Union, they organized huge meetings of stakeholders and brainstormed ideas for saving those facilities. Members reached out to find potential buyers and to shore up political support and to enlist support from other unions and allies. They distributed yard signs, sent out letters, and launched an online picket drive. The locals posted material on their websites and Facebook pages about the impact of the closings. Our leadership let elected officials at the state and federal level know that the closures would not only cost jobs, they would drive up the price of heating oil, diesel fuel, jet fuel, and it would destroy lots of small businesses that couldn't afford that. By October, thanks to the tireless efforts of our Washington Legislative Office, we got Democrats and Republicans from both the House and Senate to pressure the companies to keep the facilities open and to work harder to find new buyers. Our members met with Nancy Pelosi, who you will see later today, who agreed to raise her concerns with the White House at a White House briefing. At every level of our leadership was involved, and we pressed government officials at all levels. We met at the White House, the State House, and walked the halls of Congress. I met with former Governor Ed Rendell. Vice President Beavers requested a meeting with Governor Tom Corbett. I even had a meeting with the presidents Chief Economic Advisor, Gene Sperling, and Gene promised to work with us to make sure that there would be a path to a victory, a path to a new buyer. He would help clear the way. We also had some new ideas, and we went to work on that as well. In January, we raised the stakes by holding a press conference in Washington, where leaders from the 3 locals spoke to officials at the White House. By April, doing whatever it took began to bear fruit. ConocoPhillips now announced that they had made a deal to sell the Trainer refinery to a company controlled by Delta Airlines, which would use it to supply jet fuel for its hubs in the Northeast. We brought together a potential buyer our union had worked closely with before in other situations. Vice President Tom Conway engaged them, and we engaged the agencies of the federal and state governments, and we made a deal that saved the Philadelphia refinery, while a private equity firm began talks with Sunoco and our union to operate the Philadelphia refinery as a joint venture with another firm. Sunoco's chairman then said that it was a great partnership and a great example of collaborating and creative thinking. I want to congratulate the local union for doing that, and Vice President Conway for injecting themselves and helping to find a company that we had worked with before that would play a crucial role in saving the refinery. But I say it's an example of what happens when working men and women mobilize strategically. It was an important victory, and like every one of our gains, like the one in Alma, like the one in every one of our smaller bargaining victories, there is evidence of why we've got every right to be proud of this union that stands up and fights back and will do whatever it takes and is a union that works. Sisters and brothers, I wish I could tell you that every time we stand our ground and fight that we win. But we know that's not always true. But there's one thing we know for sure, right? We know if we do not fight, we're sure as hell going to lose. And I wish I could tell you that every union in the labor movement fights like we do. But like it or not, we also know that's not necessarily true. And I wish I could tell you that the labor movement isn't reeling and in danger of being brought to its knees by right-wing extremists and their allies in the top 1%. But do any of us really believe that that's true? You see, what's happening to working people in the labor movement isn't the result of some sort of natural evolution. In fact, if you look around the globe right now, if you look at what's going on in Australia, right-wing conservative governments are trying to destroy the labor movement in Australia. If you look at what's happening in Great Britain, right-wing government trying to destroy the labor movement in Great Britain. You look at what's happening in the United States and Canada. You look at what the governments are trying to do with trade deals between Europe and the United States and Europe and Canada. They're not trying to look at those deals to raise our standards to European standards. They're looking at those deals to lower European standards. So as I said, it sure as hell is not an accident that this is happening. It's the result of an all-out assault on working people by the rich and powerful that was in fact launched over 40 years ago. And if you have any doubt about that, let me share some facts with you from a manifesto written by a former member of the U.S. Supreme Court. It was secretly submitted to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce just 3 weeks before he was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Richard Nixon. It's called the Powell Doctrine, or sometimes called the Powell Manifesto, after its author, Lewis Powell. It was, and still is, a political call to arms for the rich and powerful. Powell said, now listen carefully, 40 plus years ago, it is essential, Powell told the Chamber, that spokesmen for the free enterprise at every level, at every opportunity, be far more aggressive than in the past. As every business executive knows, Powell wrote, few elements of American society have as little influence in government as the American businessman or the American corporation. Now, I got to stop there because I don't know what kind of shit he was smoking when he wrote that line. He said, business must learn the lesson, he wrote, that political power is necessary. And he said, such political power must be assiduously cultivated and when necessary, it must be used aggressively and with determination. Powell called on the corporate community to aggressively challenge progressive voices across the board at every level, from the universities to the consumer movement, from small towns to large cities, from large cities to state houses, from the courts to the labor unions. Now think about it. Think about what has happened in the last 43 years since Powell wrote his corporate manifesto. First of all, Powell himself got confirmed as a member of the Supreme Court, a court that has since ruled that Citizens United Corporation have the same rights as you and I do, a court that has held that the First Amendment gives money the same right of speech as a person. Think about that for a minute. If you're a billionaire, you have a loud voice. If you're a single mom working 3 jobs for minimum wage, you have no voice. Who gives them voice? Who gives them voice? We give them voice. We give them voice. That's one of the reasons they attack us so hard. The more powerful your voice is in this democracy shouldn't mean the more money you've got squirreled away in the Cayman Islands. And since those 43 years, we've seen Reagan gave corporations the high sign to bust unions and undermine the federal budget with massive tax cuts while he jacked up military spending that no one had asked for. We've seen what George Bush did when he doubled down on those tax cuts and launched an unpaid-for, disastrous war. And let's be honest, Democrats have done their part as well. Clinton passed NAFTA with Republican backing, and Clinton gutted rules that regulated Wall Street banks. And today, some Democrats, but almost every Republican, Tea Party or not, is telling us that the Trans-Pacific Partnership will create jobs. Such crap. And as Senator Elizabeth Warren said, what all of this tells us is that the system is rigged to make victims of working people. We're the targets. We're the targets of the people doing the rigging, especially those of us who are fighting for social and economic justice at every level. We're the targets of a strategy that I pointed out was started 43 years ago and has given rise to the hyper-rich 1%, the insatiable hyper-rich 1%, a financial corporate elite that has an insatiable appetite for power and political clout. And make no mistake, as I've said over and over again, the labor movement is their target. Why? Because we make them nervous. Because as I said, we're the only ones that can unite people together. We're the only ones that can bring environmentalists, civil rights movement, other progressive movements together, as well as the unemployed. We're the ones that can give voice to those that don't have voice. And that worries them. But it doesn't stop them. In fact, it makes them work harder to try and get to us. Like it or not, for 4 decades, the assault on workers' rights has harmed the labor movement. So sisters and brothers, we have a choice. We have a very, very stark choice. We can keep hoping that the next best deal we get in bargaining is enough to ensure our kids' future. And then we can sit around and coast downhill to the oblivion of the labor movement. Or we can revitalize the movement by demanding more of ourselves, more of our sisters and brothers. Do we rest on our laurels as the best negotiating union in the world? Or do we consider the possibility that our enemies, like sharks, see our shrinking numbers as evidence of the blood in the water and attack even harder? As our founding president, Phil Murray, said many, many, many years ago, the test of a union is not in periods of prosperity, but in times of adversity, and our union needs to meet that test now.